All right, welcome to This Explainer. Today we're diving into something truly profound. It's the restoration of a stolen identity. We so often hear about cold cases purely through the lens of a crime scene, right? But today we're doing something different. We are going to look at the meticulous, dedicated process of restoring a human being's dignity. We're going to explore how modern science, combined with just relentless dedication, can finally bring a name back to someone who has literally been nameless for decades.
So, let's get right into it. What does it actually take to restore a stolen identity? It's a question that requires us to look way beyond the immediate shock of a discovery. Instead, we have to focus on the painstaking work of finding out exactly who a person was before they were taken away. Our entire focus today is on the restoration of a human life, pieced together document by document and cell by cell.
And her name was Jane Hart. It is absolutely vital that we say her name right at the top of our analysis today, because for nearly 50 years, this woman was stripped of her identity. She was known in public records simply as Benton County Jane Doe. But she wasn't just a Doe, she was Jane Hart. She was a woman with a real history, a family tree, and a life that mattered long, long before it became a mystery.
Section 1. A life before the mystery. The journey from Ohio to Chicago.
Looking at her early timeline, the incredible research by the DNA Doe Project tells us Jane was actually born in Ohio back in 1906. By 1914, she was placed at St. Joseph's Orphanage for Girls in Cleveland. Now, fast forward to her adulthood, and we find her living in Chicago. Specifically, her last known residence was in Rogers Park, right near Paulina Street and Lunt Avenue. That's where she worked incredibly hard to support herself as a housekeeper.
To really understand her journey, we have to look at why she ended up in that orphanage in 1914. Well, Jane's mother was a Croatian immigrant who arrived in the United States in 1905, and while Jane was still just a child, her father died. Facing severe economic hardship, her mother simply couldn't support all of her children. So the decision to place Jane in the orphanage, it wasn't an abandonment at all. It was just a tragic reality of immigrant hardship in the early 20th century.
Section 2. The Discovery. October 8, 1976.
Okay, so on October 8, 1976, a farmer was out tending to a field near Otterbein in Benton County, Indiana. About 15 yards off a county road, he discovered a small cardboard box. Inside that box were the remains of a woman. It was a stark, completely jarring scene in rural Indiana, and from that exact moment on, she became the focal point of a mystery that would end up spanning generations.
The objective facts of her death are brief, and they are incredibly somber. She had been shot in the back of the head. According to the DNA Doe Project's meticulous research, Jane Hart was 69 years old at the time she was killed. She had basically just disappeared from the public record in Chicago sometime in the 1970s, only to be found miles and miles away in that Indiana field.
Now, I want to be super clear about this. Restoring her name did not inherently solve her murder. Public reporting indicates the homicide definitely remains unsolved. There are no named suspects, and there have been no arrests or trials. And while, plenty of local theories have circulated over the last 50 years, we are dealing strictly with the verified facts here. The legal posture is that the identification gave Jane her name back, but the circumstances of her death, that remains an inactive prosecution.
Section 3. The Science of Restoration. Identifying Benton County Jane Doe.
The absolute key to this massive effort was IgG, which stands for Investigative Genetic Genealogy. Essentially, this is the combination of advanced DNA testing with traditional archival genealogical research. The DNA Doe Project utilizes these amazing teams of highly skilled pro bono volunteer genealogists. They work tirelessly to build family trees backward and forward until they can identify a person. And they do all of this completely free of charge, simply to give people their names back.
But let me tell you, this was not an easy case. 1.6%. That number represents the massive hurdle these investigators faced. When Jane's DNA was uploaded to available databases, like GDmatch, her highest match shared only 1.6% of her DNA. Why so low? Because individuals of Eastern European and Croatian descent are vastly underrepresented in these genetic databases. So the volunteers were essentially looking for a needle in a haystack, with very, very few genetic clues to guide them.
Section 4. A breakthrough in 2024. Piecing the records together.
The volunteers didn't just rely on the DNA, though. Their methodology happened in 3 very specific phases. Step 1 involved mapping out those distant genetic matches. Then, Step 2 required them to dig through absolute mountains of historical paperwork. We're talking about cross-referencing old census data with those specific St. Joseph's Orphanage records back in Ohio.
Finally, in Step 3, they connected institutional and probate court records to surviving family members. By weaving all those physical documents with the genetic data, every single path led directly to Jane Hart.
This was a massive, collaborative effort. Strict credit really belongs to the incredible volunteer genealogists at the DNA Doe Project and the Benton County Coroner's Office, who simply refused to let this case go. Crucial lab work was provided by Estrella Forensics, Intermountain Forensics, Hudson Alpha Discovery, and Lakehead University's Paleo DNA Lab, with bioinformatics handled by Kevin Lord. And so importantly, Jane's surviving family stepped right up, taking DNA tests to provide the final definitive verification that this was their long-lost relative.
Section 5. A name restored. Jane Hart's legacy.
The human impact of all this work it's profound. Nearly 50 years after she was found in that Indiana field, Benton County Jane Doe was officially erased from the ledgers of the unidentified. Mary Kay Ross, who is Jane Hart's 78-year-old niece, shared this thought: "Hopefully she's at rest. 50 years is a long time for someone to not be known." The family actually had no idea Jane even existed, all because of that separation at the orphanage so many years ago. So while restoring her identity gave the family a huge sense of closure regarding who she was, it's also a pretty sobering reminder that the mystery of why her life ended so violently remains completely unsolved.
As we wrap up this explainer today, I really want to leave you with this provocative thought. How many more missing names are out there, just quietly waiting in the data? The technology, and quite frankly, the dedication of these volunteers, have proven that time is no longer a barrier to restoring dignity to the unidentified. Jane Hart was found because a few distant relatives decided to upload their DNA, and a dedicated team refused to quit.
If you're as fascinated by the science of investigative genetic genealogy as I am, and you want to explore the detailed history of this specific identification, there is so much more to uncover. For the full case file and much deeper insights into exactly how Jane Hart got her name back, be sure to visit CassianCreed.com. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and remember, every single name matters.